You ever notice how sometimes you walk into a room and something shifts? Nobody says anything out loud, but you feel it. The energy changes. Conversations slow down, people glance at you, then look away. Their smiles tighten. Their tone softens. It's like the whole room subtly adjusts, and you haven't even said a word. And no, it's not because you're rude or arrogant or doing anything wrong. It's something else. Something most people can't explain, but they feel it. A kind of silent intensity that you carry. You speak with intention. You ask questions that go below the surface. You listen deeply. And when you make eye contact, people often look away. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because your presence is a little much. And here's the thing, maybe you've been told that before, that you're too serious, that you overthink, that you're too intense. But what if none of that is a problem? What if you're not too much at all? Carl Jung had a powerful idea about this. He believed that some people carry a kind of energy, not fluffy spiritual light beams or mystical colors, but a psychological force, a kind of charged presence, a quiet, invisible field that doesn't just fill space, it changes it. He called this the unconscious transmission of the self. It's a kind of aura, not the Instagram filter kind, but a deep, subtle energy shaped by your thoughts, your emotions, your experiences, and most importantly, your unconscious. And people feel that, even when you're completely silent. You walk into a room and your energy speaks before you ever open your mouth. It's in your eyes, in your stillness, in your posture, in the way you don't seek approval. And that kind of energy, it makes people uncomfortable. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're holding up a mirror. See, most people walk around wearing masks, smiling when they don't mean it, saying what's safe instead of what's true. And when someone like you shows up, someone who's been through the fire, who's faced their shadow, who isn't afraid of truth, your energy exposes what they've spent years trying to hide. Their insecurities, their fear, their false self. And that scares people. So they pull away, or they gossip, or they try to shrink you to make themselves feel more comfortable. Not because you're dangerous, but because you're honest. And honesty is uncomfortable for people who are used to pretending. Carl Jung believed that people who confront their inner shadow, the dark hidden parts of themselves, begin to carry a different kind of presence. It's quiet, it's calm, it doesn't need to prove anything, and yet it unsettles people. It's like your very existence asks a question they're not ready to answer. This video is going to walk you through 13 signs that your aura might be silently overwhelming to others. Not because you're broken, but because you're rare. And in a world addicted to comfort and pretense, rare energy tends to shake people up. Let's get into it. Sign number 1. People say you're too intense. Even when you're just speaking from the heart, people say it. You're too deep, too serious. You say things others won't say. You name the stuff most people avoid. You're not trying to stir the pot. You're just being real. But that realness hits different, because while you're just speaking the truth, others feel like you're going too far. And what they're really saying is, you're making me feel things I'm not ready to feel. According to Jung, some people carry an energy that activates the unconscious in others. It wakes things up, things that have been asleep for a long time. And that kind of energy doesn't just come across as a vibe, it feels like a disruption. So no, you're not too intense, you're just honest. And that scares people more than anything. Sign number 2. Small talk drains the life out of you. How's the weather? Did you see that show? What do? You try. You really do. You smile, nod, say the polite things. But something in you resists. You can feel the emptiness of it all, the shallow rhythm of scripted conversations that never go anywhere real. This isn't because you're antisocial. It's because your energy, your aura, is wired for depth. Jung believed that people deeply connected to their unconscious have a hard time tolerating inauthenticity. And small talk, it's often just a shield, a buffer to avoid real connection. So when you show up in a space, your very presence sends a signal. This isn't real. Let's go deeper. But not everyone wants to go there, so they label you aloof, quiet, or weird. In truth, your soul is starving for realness, and your aura reflects that hunger. Sign number 3. People unload their emotions on you. You didn't ask for it, but somehow it happens. Strangers start talking to you in airports. Friends call you when they're falling apart. People say, "I don't know why I'm telling you this." You've probably been called a therapist, even if you've never studied psychology. Carl Jung believed that some people carry the archetype of the healer, not just in what they do, but in who they are. And your aura might radiate a kind of calmness, a groundedness that makes people feel emotionally safe. But here's the paradox. While you're the one holding space, you rarely feel seen in return. You listen, you help, you absorb so much, but very few people ask how you're really doing. It creates a strange loneliness. You're surrounded by emotion, but starving for connection. And often, your energy attracts people who are in pain, but scares away those who fear their own darkness. Sign number 4. People avoid eye contact with you. You walk into a space and you feel it right away. People shift. Some glance at you, then look away quickly. Others go quiet. It's subtle, but it's there. Some avoid you entirely. Jung taught that once you've integrated the parts of yourself others try to suppress, your shadow, your truth, you become a mirror. And your eye contact isn't just polite social behavior. It becomes a psychic experience. People don't just see you, they see themselves reflected in you. And if they're not ready for that kind of clarity, they flinch, they retreat. They call you intimidating, even if you're being completely kind. Because your gaze, your stillness, your presence, it silently demands honesty. Sign number 5, your presence triggers people, even when you're doing nothing. You're just sitting there, minding your business, and someone suddenly gets defensive or weirdly cold. You think, did I do something? But according to Jung, when someone has a developed, integrated aura, it can unconsciously disturb people who are hiding from themselves. Your energy acts like a silent truth serum. It pulls out things people don't want to deal with, like their insecurity, shame, or envy. And they react not to what you did, but to what they felt. This is the quiet power of someone who's done the inner work. You don't need to be loud. You don't need to assert anything. Your presence alone challenges people to confront who they really are. And most people, they're not ready for that. Let's talk about sign number 4. People seem to avoid eye contact with you. You ever walk into a room and instantly feel it? That subtle shift? People look up, glance your way, and then just as quickly they look down, look away, start fidgeting, or suddenly become really focused on their phone. The energy changes. They might even lower their voice when talking. Or you notice them acting strangely different around you. You haven't said a word, but something about your presence seems to affect them. Carl Jung had a fascinating explanation for this. He believed that when you've integrated parts of yourself that most people avoid, your shadow, your pain, your truth, you become a kind of mirror. And when people look at you, even just through a moment of eye contact, they're not just seeing you, they're seeing themselves reflected back. And if they haven't faced those parts of themselves, that reflection is too much. So they flinch, they pull back, they label you as intense or intimidating, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because your presence feels like an emotional confrontation they didn't sign up for. Your eye contact isn't just a social cue, it's a quiet reckoning. It says, I see you. And not everyone wants to be seen that clearly. Sign number 5, your presence triggers strong reactions, even when you're doing absolutely nothing. You're sitting in a room, maybe just listening, or minding your own business, and someone suddenly gets defensive with you, or irritated, or weirdly cold. You're left wondering, what did I even do? The answer? You didn't do anything, but your energy did. Jung believed that when a person carries a deeply integrated presence, someone who's done the shadow work, who's self-aware and aligned, it creates a ripple effect around them. It stirs up the unconscious in others, especially those who have been avoiding their own self-confrontation. Your presence becomes like a spotlight, not the kind that shines on you, but the kind that makes others see the parts of themselves they'd rather keep hidden. Envy, fear, insecurity, shame. And instead of realizing that it's their own internal discomfort, they project it onto you. They think you are the problem. But the truth is, they're being silently confronted by your wholeness. You're not being dramatic, you're just being you. And your energy does the talking long before you ever speak. Sign number 6. You can't stand fake personas, and people can feel that. You know those people who are always on, always performing, always smiling a little too wide, laughing just a bit too loud? It's not that you hate them, but something inside you just recoils. Like your whole being rejects the mask they're wearing. Jung talked about psychological wholeness, that once someone has integrated their shadow, the parts of themselves that are raw, messy, real, they develop a natural ability to sense fragmentation in others. So when someone is being fake or overly polished, you don't just notice it, you feel it. It's like your gut starts flashing red before your mind even fully understands why. And here's where it gets tricky, your energy. Without saying anything, sends out a quiet signal. Drop the act. I see you. Not in a threatening way, not in a judgmental way, just in an honest way. But for most people, especially those who've spent years perfecting their masks, that's terrifying. So they get defensive, they avoid you, or they write you off as too serious. But deep down, it's not about you. It's about the fact that your aura doesn't let their illusion breathe. Sign number 7. You make people second-guess themselves. You ever ask a question that makes someone pause way longer than usual? You challenge a simple statement and suddenly the whole conversation derails? It's not because you're being argumentative. It's because your clarity, the way you think, the way you see, forces people to slow down and actually consider what they're saying. Jung believed that someone with true self-awareness becomes a contradiction to the collective. In a world built on assumptions, noise, and surface-level thinking, your presence becomes an interruption. Your energy says, let's go deeper. And that energy causes confusion in people who are used to gliding by with half-truths and autopilot beliefs. They might get flustered, start over-explaining themselves, or even walk away mid-conversation. And all you did was ask a simple question. That's the psychic weight of your presence. You don't need to debate. You don't need to raise your voice. Just being rooted in truth creates friction in environments built on illusion. And for many, that's deeply unsettling. Sign number 8. People open up to you and then suddenly pull away. It happens all the time. Someone you barely know starts telling you their story, deep stuff, personal stuff. And for a moment, it feels like something real is happening, a bond, a connection. Then, silence. They stop texting, they grow distant. You're left wondering, did I do something wrong? You didn't. You just did something real. And for people who aren't ready for that, real is too much. Jung believed that when someone feels truly seen, not flattered, not judged, but actually understood, it awakens something primal. It brings parts of them to the surface they've spent years avoiding. And even though that moment felt powerful to you, it felt terrifying to them. They're not ghosting you because you crossed a line. They're retreating because they touched a part of themselves they weren't ready to face. And you were the mirror that made it happen. Sign number 9, you intimidate people, especially authority figures, even when you're not trying to. You walk into a room and the energy shifts. Suddenly, the people who usually run the show, the loud ones, the bosses, the big personalities, they get quieter, more defensive. They might start subtly undermining you or acting cold, even though you've been nothing but respectful. Jung would say this is about power, not the kind you take, but the kind you own. When someone has integrated their shadow, when they're no longer chasing approval or avoiding themselves, they radiate something Jung called the sovereign archetype. The king, the queen, the inner ruler. You don't need to puff up your chest or dominate the room. Your presence simply says, I don't need to be controlled. And for people who rely on control, dominance, or hierarchy to feel important, that is wildly uncomfortable. So they either respect you or resist you. But either way, they feel your presence. Because it's solid. It doesn't bend to approval, and that's rare. Sign number 10. You show up with kindness and somehow still become the villain. You offer support. You speak with honesty. You hold space without judgment. And still, someone flips the script. Suddenly, you're being called arrogant, cold, too intense, too emotional. They twist your boundaries into cruelty, your silence into ego, your honesty into an attack. What's happening here is projection. Jung called projection one of the greatest obstacles in human relationships. When someone refuses to look at their own flaws, they unconsciously dump them onto others. And guess what? People with powerful, aligned auras, you make the perfect screen. Why? Because your presence is too real, too clear. You didn't shame them. You simply didn't play into their illusion. You didn't beg for validation. And that made you a threat to the version of reality they were trying to maintain. You didn't become the villain. You just stopped playing the victim. And that disrupted their entire narrative. Let's finish strong. Sign number 11. You don't fit in and you don't try to. You're the quiet one in a loud group. The deep thinker in a shallow room. The observer at the party who's more interested in energy than entertainment. You could blend in if you really tried. You've probably done it before, but now you don't even bother. Why? Because you've realized that shrinking yourself to be accepted isn't connection, it's self-abandonment. And once you've tasted the peace that comes from being fully you, fake belonging just isn't worth the cost. Carl Jung talked about individuation, the process of becoming your true whole self. Not the version that society told you to be, not the mask you wore to survive, but the authentic you. And here's the truth about that path. It's lonely. Not because you're broken, but because most people are still playing roles they don't even know they're wearing. You're not weird, you're just awake. And when you're awake, in a room full of sleepers, of course you won't fit in. Sign number 12. You've stopped explaining yourself. There comes a moment in your journey where you just stop. You stop justifying your decisions. You stop defending your boundaries. You stop over-explaining your silence, your intensity, your truth. Why? Because you've realized that the people who get you don't need explanations, and the ones who demand them were never listening anyway. Jung believed that true transformation comes with a kind of quiet power, a rootedness. You no longer need to be understood by the world because you finally understand yourself. That's the shift. That's the sign. When you stop begging people to see you and start focusing on being you, that's when your aura becomes undeniable. That's when your energy speaks before you enter the room. And for those still living in confusion, fear, or denial, that kind of clarity feels dangerous, like fire. But you've become the flame. So what do you do with all this? If these signs resonated with you, you're probably not just intimidating, you're awakening. You're stepping into the kind of presence that doesn't just occupy space, it transforms it, not because you try to, but because your energy, your self-awareness, your refusal to be anyone, but your full, unfiltered self, it shakes things up. And yeah, that's going to make people uncomfortable. Some will distance themselves. Others will try to dim your light. But the real ones, the people who've done their own inner work, they'll recognize you, they'll feel you. They'll want to stand next to your fire, not run from it. Because the truth is, the more you integrate your shadow, the brighter your light becomes. And that light, it exposes everything. So no, you're not too much. You're just living in a world that's been conditioned to be less. Here's what I'll leave you with. If your presence has ever felt like too much for someone, it's probably because they're not used to someone being so much of themselves. That's not your burden to carry. That's your power to protect. So keep walking your path. Keep owning your truth. And never, ever shrink your soul to fit small spaces again. If this video resonated with you, make sure to hit that like button. It helps more than you know. And if you want to go deeper into topics like this, don't forget to subscribe. I've got more coming on shadow work, the psychology of self-awareness, and how to stop attracting what drains you and start becoming what empowers you. Until then, stay rooted, stay real, and remember, your energy is your essence. Don't waste it trying to convince people who were never meant to hold.